Hello! Now, the eagle-eyed ones amongst you will notice that actually not much time has passed since I told you I was on my way to go and see Richard to do his interview. Or maybe that hasn't happened yet. Who knows? We'll see about the scheduling. But today I've got a double trip on my hands because I'm going from interviewing Richard, I'm going to go straight to interview our other deacon in the circuit. I'm off to see Jenny Jones to find out what makes her tick, why she is who she is, what her vision is for what she does in the circuit, and kind of how we can help her in that journey. So again, fully excited. It's a very exciting day. Lots of interviews, lots of cake, lots of drink. Let's see, shall we? So, Jenny, I'm here with you. It's quite exciting. Second time ever that we've been in the same place. So I want to know all about you. Are you ready for these questions?
I am. I'm quite scared about them, but yeah, I am ready for them.
I don't think I'm that intimidating.
No, you're not really.
Okay, let's go for it then. What is your full name?
Right, my full name is Jennifer Alison Jane Jones. Now, you might think, why have I got three names? It's because I've got three older brothers, and my mother chose a name for the girl, so it's going to be a girl in each case. By the time she was pregnant with me, she'd given up choosing girls' names. So they suddenly thought, oh, we've got a girl. So I got given all the names from the previous three pregnancies.
Oh, well, there you go. I too am a double middle namer.
Oh, right.
So it's okay. I think we make up for those ones in the circuit that are boring and just don't
Andrew.
have any. We're just Andrew or just Helen.
Oh, right.
How old are you, Jenny?
Well, I used to write maths trails, so I'm going to give you a maths question here. Jenny Jones can retire at 67. She has 6 years left in ministry.
Okay.
If you can do the maths, you can work out how old I am.
Brilliant. Well, I won't give it away for everybody,
Okay.
But we'll leave it like that.
It also makes me 20 years older than Yan Yan, which is scary.
20 years older or 20 years more experienced in life?
Okay, we'll go for that.
We'll
Sounds
go with
better.
that one. Yeah. We won't mention that I'm probably the same age as your children. But
I think you are.
anyway, let's move on from that one. Can you tell me what your role is here in Nottingham North East?
Right, well, I have transferred in from what was Nottingham Central Mission, and my role is to spend most of my time working alongside the LGBT community in the city. Not just the city centre, although that's where it predominantly is. And that involves meeting people, talking with families who having to adjust perhaps to having an LGBT person in their family. It might also be the pastoral needs of people who have been really abused by the church. So that's my most significant role, but I also work in Nottingham South alongside Bridgeway Hall, and that's around food poverty. So that links in with what's called Sunday Takeaway, where we give people a 3-course meal. It's takeaway at the moment, but it was sit down. And also with the food bank now.
Exciting. So quite a varied.
I
get to meet lots of people.
Yeah, well, I do, not in normal circumstances, but lockdown has been a bit of an issue when it's all sort of face-to-face stuff. The stuff, obviously, in Nottingham South continued as normal because we didn't stop feeding people when they're in need. Yeah. But the LGBT stuff has been really difficult through the pandemic, yes.
Absolutely. So how long have you been in Nottingham?
We came to Nottingham in 2017, so we are just in our fourth year.
You know, those maths
fourth
trails
year,
you were
maths
talking
trails,
about. Okay, so fourth year, and that kind of means that you're kind of thinking about what comes next or what happens. So it's a case of watching that space at the moment.
It is watching that space. We are having conversations with the circuit, with our families, and it is watch that space and see what happens.
Brilliant. Well, we've got at least another year.
You've got at least another year.
So I'm quite excited to see what's coming. Now, your role is as a deacon in the church. We're going to have a conversation with Helen about what that means at another point, and publish it so that we all finally get an idea of what a deacon really does.
You might know, but a lot of people never get onto it. We're not proper ministers. Yes, we are proper ministers.
I'm making sure I'm very, very definite and careful with my interviews to use the right terminology. So, as a deacon, you obviously do lots of different things. But how long have you been a deacon?
I started in circuit in 2010 in Leeds. So I did 7 years in Leeds. I was ordained in 2012. And in Leeds, my thing, again, was around poverty and homelessness, and particularly about financial inclusion.
Okay. Now, from what I've gleaned from you over the last year as we've been working together, finance features in your life before being a deacon as well. Tell us about that.
Well, I left school with A-levels, which is quite often the case when you go into the City of London, because I lived in London, I'm a Londoner, and it was the place you just went to work in the City of London. So I worked for Bank of America International, a merchant bank, and we know how people hate merchant banks these days. Starting off basically doing backroom stuff, but then moving into dealing in the Eurobond market. And then my faith really pulled me out of that, because I just felt to me wrong that literally by picking up the phone and buying and selling bits of paper, I could make tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. And when I realised that other people were really struggling and working really hard to get a pittance, it just felt wrong, and I just felt I couldn't continue with doing that. So I then went and started working from home, because I had got my children by then, just doing bookkeeping. And when my youngest was about 6 or 7, I took a role in a charity as a financial manager. You might not surprise you. But they didn't let me do that for very long. They kept saying, "Oh, could you come and help us with this project? And could you come and help us with that project?" And in the end, by the time I left, I was doing about 1/3 of my time doing finance and about 2/3 of my time running projects in schools. The charity was something called an education business partnership, which is what it says on the tin, education and business working together to try and prepare children with the skills they need for the working life or not working life, whatever it is, and also getting businesses to understand how schools work.
Excellent. So quite a varied career,
Varied.
doing lots of different things, and interesting to pick up that transition from being business-minded and very much City of London, what we expect from bankers, through to this people-centred, to where you find yourself now very much with people on the ground.
Absolutely. And some of the projects we did were really quite basic projects. You know, we had one that was called Dreamcatcher. I'm trying to get young people to recognise what their dreams were and how realistic their dreams were. And so we worked particularly with the Turkish community, who have, in North London, had a very low pass rate at exams. So what could motivate them to work better, work harder? And so we literally spent time bringing people in from their community who had high aspirations, and those that had middle aspirations, and those that had very, you know, it was just wanted to stay at home and be a mum or whatever. And it was really quite tragic, I think, how low the aspirations of many young people were. So to be able to let them dream a bit better and see what was holding them back was really exciting. I loved it.
Brilliant. There's a big teapot here in the table. So before that gets cold, would you like to tell me what you've brought for us to eat and drink together? Right.
So what we have here is a copy of Wesley's teapot. No, it doesn't look anything like Wesley's teapot, but it's Wedgwood and it's blue china and it's got the prayers on. But so this is a teapot, so you can gather it's tea. I try only to have decaffeinated, so
okay, that's fine.
If you do serve me caffeinated at a church function, I will drink it, but not coffee. It's Earl Grey.
Okay.
So I have Earl Grey loose leaf tea, and I have it black, but I bought some milk so in case you want it. And then for our big reveal.
Oh, this is what you've been baking.
This is what I've been baking.
Very good.
Is a cream tea. Now, I'm not going to say Cornish or Devon because you can put it exactly the way you like. And the reason I forgot that is I was ordained in the Plymouth Conference, and no, at the Plymouth Conference, but the ordination itself happened at Gwynedd Pitt.
Okay.
Have you heard of Gwynedd Pitt?
I have.
Well,
everyone else might not have
no,
done,
they might not have done. Well, Gwynedd Pitt is not a church building as such. It is a church, but it's outdoors. It's from a mining accident caused this cavity, I suppose, and it was turned into a Methodist site. And I think John Wesley called it the most magnificent spectacle in the whole of Britain, or something like that.
Okay.
So it was an outdoor one, but because it was outdoor, you didn't have your classic place for your tea. So everybody was given a bag with their goodies in, and part of that was a cream tea. So I thought I would give you a cream tea.
No, absolutely.
So I hope that's all right.
Of course.
There we go. And as Marc said, I am not a baker, so I was up this morning baking. We don't have cake tins, so I couldn't make him a cake.
Well, there we go. I'm well up for scones. Scones. Who knows?
I'm a scone, but Ali's a scone, so.
Okay, so a mixed household.
Mixed family. Would you like milk or not milk?
Let's go without, if that's the way it's normal. I don't think I've ever had a cup of Earl Grey. So
well, lots of people say it's just like drinking perfume, but see what you think.
Sell it to me, Jenny. Sell it to me. I'll give it a go. Not a problem.
Oh.
So as we dig in, can you tell me what your favourite cake is?
I actually don't like cake. I've never had a particularly sweet tooth, so I'm putting lots of jam on my scone. And because Ali is diabetic, we just don't eat cake, so I don't tend to have it. Every so often I have a craving, and it's probably carrot cake if I have.
Okay. Yeah. So you said not coffee. Do you not drink any coffee?
I do drink decaf coffee in the morning, but I don't drink it other times. There is one exception to that, and that's when I'm driving long distance, often from one of the children, when I've looked after the grandchildren for a while, and I find myself at a service station desperately tired, and I pump myself full of caffeine to get home.
That's fair enough. But your preference would be a tea?
My preference would be a tea.
Okay. Do you like sport, either to watch or to participate in?
I used to enjoy sport, but I think I'm a bit past that now. But I'm a bit sort of, I'm a summer and a winter sport person. So in the summer, I love my tennis, and I'm a Wimbledon addict. So if I can possibly watch it, I will. And in the winter, I'm a rugby. But you're not going to like me for this, because it's England.
Well, we all have our burdens to bear. Mine is to be a Scotland fan, obviously.
Yeah.
That is quite a burden. But that's okay. What about films? Do you enjoy films?
We watch a lot of films. In fact, we have so many DVDs. We're an old-fashioned family in that respect. We have DVDs. But choosing an actual favourite, if you ask me for a box set, it would be West Wing.
Okay.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to think what was my favourite film that was good to admit that was my favourite film. And I came up with The Greatest Showman.
Okay.
Just because I love that song, This Is Me. Right. I just think it fits in with my LGBT work. And as soon as they sang it the first time, it brought me to tears. I just thought, we should allow people to be who they are. So that's
brilliant song. There is that version that I've seen on YouTube where they're singing it in the rehearsal, and Hugh Jackman breaks down in tears as they're singing it in the room, and as she claims it.
Yes.
You can almost see the director looking at her saying, "Own this."
Yeah. And
that twisting point, and it really is brilliant.
Absolutely, it just gets me every time.
There we go. So you've mentioned a song within a film that you love, but is music something that you spend time with?
It is, but less than I used to, and I think that's partly because as you get older you need to concentrate harder, so you don't have music on in the background quite so much. And I was trying to think what was my favourite song, and I thought, well, what are the ones I put on when I'm driving, because that's the time when I just listen to music. And then so I then had this sort of juggling. Was it Meatloaf? Was it the Proclaimers? Or was it Tom Lehrer? And I came down with Tom Lehrer because of my warped sense of humour.
Okay.
I don't know if you know who Tom Lehrer is.
No.
He was somebody who was in the 50s and 60s, and he was an American who sort of sang on a programme, I think it was This Is the World That Was, or something like that.
Right.
And they're very satirical, and they're very, very disgusting in some ways. And the two songs I really like are Poisoning the Pigeons in the Park and The Masochism Tango. And they are just outrageous, but they make me laugh. And I have to say, I'm not into masochism, and I'm not into poisoning pigeons, but these just make me laugh. I mean, some people will know him for the Elements song, which when he goes through all the elements of the chemistry table.
That one I've heard, or at least parodies of, and all sorts of things. I'm learning things, Jenny.
I know.
Well, there we go. Moving swiftly on from the masochism and poisoning pigeons, and you've stated that's not a hobby of yours, to poison pigeons. So what do you do? What do you do in your spare time?
Well, I absolutely love gardening. I've got this garden, and we've got our retirement home that we bought because we had money that we needed to invest. And that garden is about twice the size of this one, so I spend quite a lot of time. Now, it's not looking great at the moment. It got really affected by the snow and the frost, so things are taking a long time to get going. But hopefully, when you come back to do the diaconal one, it might be it might have grown up a bit.
We'll see.
We will.
Have lots of colours behind us then. Yeah. So that keeps you outside. Is that like spring, summer, autumn, and winter that you're in the garden?
No. I like to be warm in the winter. I suppose it starts about March and it goes on to about November, that sort of time.
Okay. So what do you do in those winter months?
I mooch.
Plot and plan for the garden.
There is an element of that. Yeah, there is an element of that. I mean, I'm not very good in the winter anyway, I have to say. It's not my favourite time. Yeah. So I read books. I used to do a lot of embroidery, and I still sometimes do that. But again, perhaps I just don't have the patience anymore that I used to have. And I need a project. So, I mean, one year we did, we made a Christmas tree out of squares that then became a blanket for somebody that needed a blanket. So that sort of thing I'm quite happy to do. I'm quite happy to knit something, but I need to have a purpose for doing it. And sometimes that's what I need to be given.
Oh, that's fair enough. Do you have any hidden talents?
Well, it's really hard. I would initially say no. But somebody pointed one out to me just last week when we were sitting on a Zoom meeting, and they said to me, I have a very good poker face during Zoom meetings that I can look really interested in what's going on. So this is my hidden talent, is to look really interested during Zoom meetings. So if I look really bored, it must be a bad meeting.
Okay. In that case, I'm going to have to up my game with the messages that I send you during Zoom meetings to try and see if I can crack that poker face a little bit. What's your greatest achievement?
I think it's bringing up my children. I think, bringing up children in London, and they've, in my opinion, turned out into wonderful people. And in the opinion of others as well. And we now have 4 brilliant grandchildren who are equally perfect. So, I think that's my greatest achievement.
I think that's fair enough. Do you have any tenuous links to a celebrity?
Yes, and it is tenuous, so you might have to think this through as I go through it. I'm a great Strictly fan. I do like my Strictly Come Dancing. And my link is to a Strictly Come Dancing celebrity. So both my parents are single children, so I don't have any cousins.
Okay.
So, but my mother had really good links with her cousins, so I had relationships with my second cousins. And one of my second cousins has a son called David Webb. Now, David Webb is an opera singer, and you may have seen him on telly. He sang at the Queen's Jubilee. I remember on the barge where all those opera singers singing, and it was pouring with rain. Well, David was one of those. And more importantly, he sang Happy Birthday to my father at his 90th birthday. So, really important things. Yes. Well, anyway, David Webb lived with Karen Clifton, who is now Karen Hoyer, because she's changed her name, for a couple of years. Unfortunately, just recently they've broken up. But yeah, so that's my link to a celebrity.
Well, there we go. Yeah. There we go. That is impressive.
But it's tenuous.
It's tenuous. It does what it says on the tin. Yeah. It does what it says on the tin. And lastly then, for these quickfire questions that haven't been quickfire,
sorry.
And I really should change the name because nobody's been quickfire. Tell us something about you that nobody or very few people would know.
Well, I'm going to tell you something that actually quite a few people do know, but probably in this circuit they don't know.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fine.
It's that I very rarely wear shoes. If I'm wearing shoes, it's because I'm preaching. I'm preaching or I'm at a church meeting, I'm feeling very formal. But actually, even then, I've probably taken them off if under the table. So.
Well, there we go. There we go. Every now and then, I find myself taking my shoes off when I am preaching.
Yeah.
Or when I'm leading worship. Normally it's because I'm wearing flip-flops, and if I'm getting up and down, I don't want to fall over. But there's something I find at times about being on holy ground, and it's kind of an expression of where I'm at. But right now, we're not on holy ground, we're in your garden.
Yes, quite. Everywhere's holy ground.
Okay, touche.
And I have to admit, even at our wedding, well, to be fair, I'd sprained my ankle because I'd been wearing shoes the day before.
And you weren't used to it.
So at my wedding, I didn't wear shoes either.
Is there a reason? Is it just the freedom of naked feet?
I've got very wide feet, and I think just putting them in shoes is really uncomfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there
so
we go.
there's something else that's new about me. I didn't know I've got very wide feet.
Well, there we go. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Did you bring with you a random item?
I did. It's a couple.
I've seen some random items on my travels. That's quite common.
It is quite common, but it's random. But on the other side of it, I was on a retreat about 20 years ago, I should think. And it was the first retreat I went on. I'm not really a retreaty sort of person, but it's the first retreat I went to. And somebody who obviously didn't know me because they put Jennifer, and nobody called me Jennifer apart from my mother used to. And on it is written, "On this rock I will build my church." And that spoke to me in a way that I never thought a cobble with a few words written on. And I think perhaps it helped when it came to my calling. So it helped me realise that actually this feeling of that I was not worthy or anything, but somehow, the church is built on you and me and everybody.
Excellent. So where does the cobble live?
The cobble lives upstairs in my office. It always is in my office somewhere near my computer, so it reminds me. So
a good paperweight.
I don't think it's just a paperweight. I mean, it shows how old it is. You can hardly read the words. I might have to go over them, but I might spoil it, and I don't want to do that. No, it's there as a reminder that's actually, we've all got a role, and I don't want to forget that.
Absolutely. Brilliant. So random, but it definitely says something about you and who you are. Now, you've perhaps mentioned a little bit of this as we've discussed. It's fine. Nice shot of the teapot. Perhaps mentioned some of this in your journey in your previous occupations and things. But you would call yourself a Christian, and you would find yourself in this strange world of Christianity. How did you get to claiming Christianity as your faith?
Like many of the other people, I am a cradle Methodist, cradle Christian.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's a bit of a family joke that my parents spent so much of their time in church that we were probably conceived there, but I don't think that's entirely true. But I just believed always in stories. I believed in the historic figure of Jesus. It was just part of who I was. I just knew those stories.
Just forgive my uncouthness.
Yeah, that's all right. And I think I was about 13 or 14 when a friend invited me along to something called Crusaders.
Okay.
And they did things differently. You know, you were allowed to really have your voice in what was being said. They did worship songs as opposed to classic Methodist hymns. And something in me took that leap from believing in Jesus as a historic figure to actually Jesus was my saviour. And that didn't mean I stayed with Crusaders, because I didn't stay with them for very long. But it was just enough to sort of move my faith on. And and to me to say, I want to follow Jesus. Now, I made a mess of it half the time. You know, I had times when I was really close to God and other times when I was miles away from him. But that was the point when, yes, I knew that there was something that I didn't want to let go of. Something that this God was part of the inner me, had died for me, had raised, or he'd suffered. I think I have quite a focus on the cross to some degree. I do very much focus on the resurrection as well, but something about the cross and Good Friday is really important to me. So
there we go. Brilliant answer. So, Cradle Christian, Cradle Methodist, you said. Why have you stuck with the Methodist Church? I think I need to change this question, because it was why the Methodist Church, but I'm going to change it to why have you stuck with the Methodist Church?
I think until I went to college to train for ministry, I would have happily moved to whichever church was right for me. But where I lived close to the Methodist Church, that's where all my friends were and what have you. So I stuck with it partly for that reason. But I always thought if I moved to somewhere that didn't have Methodism, that wouldn't stop me going to church, or I wouldn't travel, miles to go to a Methodist church. I would go to whichever church was there. But when I was at college, I think the reality of Methodism and how I fit into Methodism became a reality as I started to really look at what other denominations do. So the whole social justice thing is huge for me, and Methodists do that well. The broadness, I think, of Methodism, so that what we believe embraces so many different sort of traditions, and the covenant service. I suddenly realised that I couldn't live without the covenant service. It's and I think it was when Anglicans experienced it, which is something they don't normally experience, that I realised how special some of our liturgies were.
Which bit of the covenant service really kind of sings to your soul?
I think it is the covenant prayer where, put me to what you will. Let me be laid aside for you. And I think it spoke to me particularly at that time because my mother was suffering from Alzheimer's. And that being laid low really spoke to me that actually she's still loved. She's still really important in God's eyes. But, we're put in places and we have our purposes. And I mean, one of my big things, which I'll talk about later, is embracing everybody, and everybody has a place. And I think even in the depths of her Alzheimer's, God used her, which I think is extraordinary.
Great. Brilliant. So we've discovered that this is your faith because of Jesus. This is your church because of that inclusion, because of that commitment, that covenant that we're called to. But how did you get your calling to this position, this role as a deacon within the life of the church?
Well, I felt God was calling me for about 15 years before I actually responded. Well, that's not entirely true. What I thought was God was calling me to something, and I couldn't work out what it was. So, won't surprise you, that was a church treasurer.
Yeah, that
won't
fits.
surprise you at all. And then I was asked would I do prayer ministry, so I did prayer ministry and loved that. But still, there was some of this knocking going on. So then the worship leaders course came out, so I became a worship leader. And then all sorts of things happened, and I kept saying, well, yeah, I'll do that next thing. I'll take on that next responsibility. But it's okay. I'm not being called to be a presbyter because I have no calling to preach.
Okay, yep.
So that was okay. I could just ignore this feeling that God was calling me to something. But this knocking on my brain wouldn't go away. And then, as part of my role within the EBP, I was asked by one of the head teachers if I would write a lottery bid. I come from Enfield, and many of you will know the Enfield Rifles and the small arms factory that is in Enfield. And that site had been put over for housing. But there had been no social or community facilities provided.
Right.
And this head teacher had said, Jenny, is there any chance we have a lot of land? Could you write a lottery bid for an all-weather sports thing? So, sort of thing I did. So I got the local authority on board, I got businesses on board, I got all those sort of community things on board. And at the last minute someone said, have you spoken to the deacon?
The who?
And I went, the who? Exactly. I'm a cradle Methodist, and I went, the who. As far as I was concerned, that I can remember these deaconesses from the past who were old and came to circuit meetings and sat in their blue and white. So anyway, I went along to see the deacon who worked in that area, and it was a really a eureka moment. And I went back to the website, and it was like, oh God, you've got me now. As I ticked every box, I went, that's what you've been telling me I need to do. And so I went and spoke to my newly installed minister, the Reverend Alistair Jones, who had just arrived at our church, and he said, well, we need to get you onto foundation training. I mean, it was quite fortunate in a way that I just missed the deadline for applying it that year, so I had a year to sort of think about it and think, am I going completely mad? But actually, no, everything, it was like every door was open to me, and I just went through. And I think what's interesting is God got me through training, got me into circuit, and then sort of said, right, I've got you as a deacon where I want you. Now I'm going to call you to preach. So yeah, God has a really warped sense of humour. Yeah.
Whereas had you had the preaching bit before, you might have...
I was being pressed into presbyter. Even at college I was being pressed. Are you sure you're not a presbyter? Because I think, well, somebody said I would scare presbyters because I'm too efficient.
I'm not going to pass any judgment. I've had my knuckles rapped for making comments about CPD in some interviews already, so I'm not going to make any comments about the presbyters in our circuit.
CPD? Yeah, let's not talk about it. I don't look at it.
If somebody else knows it, we'll call on them. Again, if I get the sack, it's because I haven't edited this bit out of the interview. We're going to have a pause, and you can munch on some scone, whichever it is. But as we do that, we're going to have a listen to or sing along to a hymn or a worship song that kind of speaks to you at the moment. I know we go through seasons. I'm just going to ad-lib until you finish swallowing. We go through seasons of which our favourites are and which speak to us at different points. But at this moment, which speaks to you and why?
That wasn't what I worked on, but anyway, the one I worked, I spent a long time thinking about this because I love so many. It's difficult to actually pick on one. Well, I actually came down to the really old classic, And Can It Be?
Okay.
And the reason I chose that one because it's featured at so many important parts during my walk with God.
Right.
And I think it was one of those moments. I spent a summer when I was 17 down at Trelawney Manor, which is a Methodist Guild holiday place, and I worked on the staff there, but the staff were allowed to join in all the social activities if they weren't on duty. And I can remember one Sunday evening there was hymn singing, and that sounds really boring, and young people think, oh, that sounds awful, but actually it was really good fun. You know what Methodists like when they really get together and sing. And we sang And Can It Be, and the minister who was leading it just said, I want the young people to sing this particular verse, and it's the verse which talks about my chains fell off, my heart was free, I rose when the forces followed me. And that had a huge emotional wave of feeling came over me, and it was, my chains have come off, and I put them back on again, and the next but my chains come off again. And I think it just, every time I sing it, I'm not particularly an arm waver during worship, but my hands want to go up and say, my chains have come off and I am free. And that's what God does for you. And we let the world bring everything back in and chains back down again. But if we let God, the chains come off.
Brilliant. Let's have a listen.
Sing with me, and can it be? And can it be that I should gain an interest in the Saviour's blood? Died He for me, who caused His pain, for me who hated to death pursued. Amazing love. on my imprisoned spirit lay, fast bound in sin and nature's night. Thine eye diffused the quickening ray, my wounded dungeon flame with light. My chains fell off, my heart was free. I rose when hope had followed me. My chains fell off, my heart was free. I rose when hope had followed me. No condemnation, no condemnation now I dread. Jesus and all in Him is mine. Alive in Him, my living head, and clothed in righteousness divine. Lord, I approach the eternal throne and take the crown through Christ my own. Lord, I approach the eternal throne and take the crown through Christ my Lord, I approach. Lord, I approach the eternal throne and take the crown through Christ my
Okay, so we've got to know a bit about you, a bit about your journey so far. These next questions are kind of designed to help you to think and to share with us where you're at the moment, and kind of, you know, what about your role that you get excited about, you don't get quite so excited about, and what you do to keep excited about your faith. So let's dive in with that. As you go about your job, your calling, your role within the circuit, what is it that really excites you, that makes you get up in the morning with a smile on your face and say, I get to do this?
I think that with most people, it is about getting to know people. It's about hearing their stories and seeing how their stories weave with the story of God. And trying to help them to understand that their life's journey weaves with the story of God. And I think there's something when you see a light go on in somebody's eyes, thinking, oh, this might be relevant for me. And I've never thought about it. It might be because they've never been to church. It might be because church has hurt them. They've turned off. But suddenly, to see someone thinking, oh, yes. And I'm not a great believer that I need to see people converted to God. I think often my role is to sow the seed that allows them to find God themselves. And that's, I just love meeting people and sparking off ideas, because I'm not the greatest creative person, but I think sometimes you can be the person that goes along and just helps create something in somebody else without even knowing it. So, you know, many of the conversations I've had, people will talk about a significant moment, and as they tell you their story, something new out of their story comes to life for them. And that's what excites me. And to have people say, oh, can I be part of a Christian faith, although it's something I can give them.
Can you let me in?
Yeah, can you let me in? I find very exciting. I mean, I find it quite depressing as well that I sometimes look and think, I don't know where you're going to fit in to the church as the church is now, but I do think you can get people on the Christian faith journey, and that's what excites me.
Brilliant. It's that idea, kind of what I'm picking up is that idea of helping people to realise perhaps what they've already known, or to perhaps be that kindling
Yeah.
that takes their creative spark and takes who they are and sees it lit up properly.
And there's when people who are unchurched, unfaith, whatever word you want to say, could you pray for me? I just find that such a privilege to someone say, you know, I mean, I had it just this last week, somebody who comes to Sunday supper, tragic case of her mother dying, and she just said, you're the one person I can ask to pray. And I thought that is just such a privilege to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, her story is tragic, and I've heard it through. But yeah, I just think actually the church is there for people. And I don't think this is a short-term thing. I think it will develop. But where it will develop to is for God, not for me.
Yeah. All you can do is make that introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So along those same sort of lines then, what bit about your role, you know, when you wake up and you see in your diary XYZ, you know, Marc's
Zoom.
coming, Zoom, or Marc's coming to interview me today, what bits do you kind of think, I have to do it, but I'm not really excited about it?
I get really fed up with the church's obsession with their resources, whether it's their buildings or their finance. I mean, I'm a finance person, I'm careful, I believe we need to be good stewards, but I'm not sure the church is good stewards of its resources. I think we should be enabling our churches either to close, if that's appropriate, or to be used much better. I believe in the church outside its walls. I think that's where God's work happens. We go to where people are rather than expecting people to come to us.
Yeah.
But I get distraught almost with the fact that our buildings are quite often just used for an hour or so a week. And I just think we should be looking differently about what we use for worship, whether we use a church building as the classic church building. And if we have that, how do we use it better during the week? And some of it can be explicitly missional, and some of it can just be hospitality, but good hospitality.
Good hospitality is the way forward. So it sounds like then your understanding of the idea of stewardship, not to get too deep and theological, but that idea that back in Genesis, God says to mankind, kind of gives us this charge of stewarding the earth. And we could see that as just keeping it to ourselves. But what I'm hearing from you is to say, actually, to be good stewards of what we have might be to cultivate it, to share it, rather than just keep it locked away for that proverbial rainy day.
Very much so. I mean, I'm treasurer of the diaconal order, and that's one of the questions we've been having, is actually, we're in the rainy day, what should we be doing with our money? We had a meeting recently where it said that there is £200 million locked away in church and circuits bank accounts.
Wow.
That to me is wrong. You know, there's the rainy day and there's the, actually, it's a bit like the talents, we're putting them in the ground and burying them. You know, we should be using them for God's purposes.
And the key word within that I heard was locked away, almost as if it is so tightly locked, nobody actually knows where the key is anymore.
No.
And even if they did, they wouldn't tell you.
No, that's very true. And I mean, one of the churches that I did when I was at college, they were probably going to close. They had very little income, but they were in a very poor estate. And they just decided that actually what they were going to do was they were going to open their doors to groups that asked, but they weren't going to charge for use of the halls, but would ask for donations.
Okay.
That if they had money, would they pay? Their church halls were then used all the hours that they could possibly be open, and the income was huge. So instead of saying it's going to cost you £25 an hour, they asked for donations, pay what you can. And actually what happened was the church turned around. And it felt to me like this is how God wants it to be, is let's open our doors, offer hospitality, and then the rewards will come back in. And in fact, it brought people into the church as well. So
There we
win-win.
go. There we go. So that's perhaps a key lesson for us to take away as we move forward as well. I was chatting with Helen a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about what it is for her to be a deacon and to have this rhythm of life and the prayer book and having people pray for you on your day of the quarter or whatever it is. So you're not allowed to use that as your answer to this next question.
Oh, bother.
Unless, of course, that is the real thing.
It is the real thing.
What is it? What is it that you do to keep yourself spiritually fresh and growing and going?
I think it's been difficult during this period of pandemic to keep yourself going. I think we need fellowship, and we need to spark things off each other. I've been a bit rude about the church, but I do believe in fellowship. Because I think we can read our Bible and perhaps we can look at a commentary or we can read a book about the Bible, but actually we need to share what God is speaking to us in those words. So I think it has been difficult during the pandemic, but I have got the rule of life, and that does give you that rhythm. It gives you permission to say, I need to go on a retreat, I need to take time out to pray, because actually we can't do the work without those building blocks behind us. I mean, in some ways, I suppose I'm lucky. I'm married to Ali, so we have a prayer life together. He's a presbyter, so he preaches every week, so he's always looking at the next week's passage, shall we say, and we spark ideas off each other. I mean, Ali thinks completely out of the box, so sometimes I have to draw him in and say, no, you really can't say that. But because he thinks completely out of the box, that's actually really helpful for me, because I tend to be perhaps a little more conservative, so we sort of bounce off each other. But I do think, like everybody else, this has been a really hard year, and that's, we need to give ourselves some slack. Ecclesiastes talks about a season for this and a season for that, and I think this has been a hard season.
Yeah.
And I was surprised. We went to church on Easter. We went to an outdoor service on Easter Sunday, and I was so emotional when we sang. I hadn't realised how much I'd missed singing. Singing to Zoom is not the same as singing with others, and my heart soared. It really did. And as I say, I can't wait now to get back to singing. And I think we need to organise some open air services so that we can actually sing rather than hum into our masks.
Yeah, I fully get that. Fully get that. Just picking up on one of these things that you've mentioned. Tangent. It's not on the screen, so you're gonna have to think off the bat. But you've mentioned this idea of a retreat. That's perhaps something that doesn't fall into other people's experiences. Can you just share with us a little bit about what you would do on a retreat, what a retreat is, and how that helps you?
It's basically taking time out to be with God, and there are all sorts of types of retreat. I mean, those that are sort of very spiritual, which is not me, might go on a 28-day silent retreat. I would find really impossible. I literally impossible. Silent retreats don't really go with me. I do love silence, and I love it when I can let my brain relax into silence and let God speak to me. And that happens sometimes, but I'm not very good at it. I always get distracted by the ironing needs doing or something else.
What colour your socks are?
Yeah,
Big
quite.
tips.
Have socks on. But it's basically taking time out, and it might be a led retreat where you have a leader that might give you 20 minutes, half an hour of a Bible reflection or something, and then just says, and go away and think about that. And that might involve going for a walk. It might just go to your room and spend time with God. It's about just stepping back from everyday routines with a deliberate aim of spending time with God.
That idea of stepping back rather than running away.
Yes.
I think it's very important.
And it's part of our discipline as a deacon. We are expected to have one retreat at least a year.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Must be nice to have that built in.
It is, and that's one of the great things. And I will, we've got this thing called a Methodist way of life coming in, which is about a rule of life similar to the diaconal, and it is permission giving. It gives you permission to say, time with my family is important, and unless I spend time with my family, I can't really serve God in the way.
Yeah.
It's saying that to spend time reading the Bible is important. And I just think sometimes, particularly people who are working full-time and then involved with the church, sometimes we expect too much of them, and it's important to say, we give you permission to actually stop for a while, take time for prayer, take time for worship, take time to study your Bible, because actually unless you have those building blocks there, you're going to burn out.
Again, I feel like I've perhaps teased out some of these answers already, but the next question is, what have you learned recently about God, or about your faith, about what it is to live, that you think we should all hear?
My dad died about 2 years ago, after a quite long illness, and although he was in his 90s, there's something about when your dad dies or your parent dies that is final. I mean, sounds silly. I know he's going to be with God. He's a wonderful Christian man. But there's something final about that relationship that you have with a living person. And I think the pandemic has also brought this, that this, the God the Comforter. We give God all sorts of names, but one of the things is God the Comforter. And I found that aspect of my faith really important during this time. Understanding that God is there. God will put his arms around you. God will hold you in those times when you just really don't know what you're meant to feel, what you're meant to do. And he doesn't want anything from you. He just says, be yourself. Have these feelings that might be anger, they might be not understanding, all those feelings that you have with grief. Mm-hmm. I understand where you are. Just be that with me. You might want to put on a brave face when you go out and do your ministry, or you might want to put on your brave face when you do this. But in my presence, you can be and feel what you need to feel. So yeah.
That's an important, really important lesson. As I've been going around, I'm kind of asking the staff to think, kind of, what is their vision? What's their hope and their dream, and that kind of longing of their soul for what they want to see us as a circuit become or achieve, or to realise in God's image and in God's timing and God's calling on us. What does your heart say to you?
I think we're all coming together. We're some of us are friends already, but a lot of us don't know each other. And I think there's something about, I want to stop us all putting each other into a box and saying, we're all Methodists, we're all the same, we're all uniform. I don't think that's what God is saying. I think God is saying, I want you to be unified, but you don't have to be uniform. And I think he wants us to, what I will see for the church is that we recognise the diversity and celebrate it and say, you are who you are, created as you are, and I am who I am. And let's find a way of bringing all that together and making something wonderful for God. Our church is an elderly. The demographic is we are getting older. Everybody has a purpose in God's kingdom. One of my favourite verses in the Bible is 1 John 3:2, which is about, beloved, we're all children of God, but what we will become has not yet been revealed. Yeah. And each of us is on a journey, and bits of God's creation in us are revealed constantly. And so, you might suddenly find that, you're feeling old and your knees don't work, and so you can't do the cleaning of the church or whatever. Yeah. But actually, there's something in God's kingdom that you can do. And I talked about my mother when she had dementia. She had a joy in her faith that she never had when she was shall we say, on her best behaviour. You know, she would dance and she would shout hallelujah in places which were totally inappropriate, to be honest with you. But it came out, and that for me was something joyous. Whereas, you know, before she'd been the runaround, she'd run the kitchen, she'd done this, that, and the other, and you would have never heard the word hallelujah come from her mouth. So I just think we just need to celebrate and be who we are at this time, recognising that we're going to develop into something else. And I just think we could be an amazing circuit if we just allow each other to be who we're meant to be, and to look at others and say, well, do you know, we could learn something from them, or we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a rambling, but I just, yeah, I think there's something about creating something out of all of us and in our diversity. And obviously with the LGBT work that I do, I would love to have some inclusive churches within the circuit. I have people that want to find churches, and until I come out and see you, I need to make sure these spaces are safe for them, because it only takes one person to say something negative about a gay person or a trans person, and they will be put off church for life.
Absolutely. As we finish, and as we hopefully journey into that vision, could you pray for us?
I'll do my best. I think I'm almost worded out, but yes, I'll do my best.
It's just one last prayer.
Yeah. Loving and living God, we bring before you the circuit of Nottingham North East and its people. We pray that you will inspire us on our journey with you, that you will open our hearts and our minds to what you're doing, and that we may follow in your mission wherever you send us. We pray for all those people we don't know, we haven't yet met, but that together we as your people will serve and minister to each other and to those who are on the margins of our society, letting them know that your love is for everybody and that they too are members of your kingdom. So we ask this in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your garden with me and for my afternoon tea.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's really nice to see you, because you have just been a man in a shadowy picture on Zoom.
Yeah, it's the problem with that skylight. You just get the glare from my head.